You're listening to The Intellectual Investor, episode number 49, The 8%, written by Vitaliy and read by Elliot. To read this article online, or to listen to more episodes, visit investor.fm. To learn more about Vitaliy's investing firm, IMA, go to imausa.com. The 8%. This podcast will not discuss the stock market or the economy. Instead, I'm going to write about some very random topics that are relevant to me this morning. I promise to switch back to regular programming next week. ValueX clusters Zurich, Milan, Verona, and Venice. In late January, my brother Alex and I are going to attend the ValueX conference in Klosters, Switzerland, organized by my friend Guy Spear. I wrote a 3-part series about my trip last year. If you missed it, I encourage you to read it. We'll post that in the show notes. It will take you through our journey from Zurich to southern France. The ValueX conference, be it the one in Klosters organized by Guy or the one in Vail organized by my company, is where like-minded, die-hard value investors get together to share ideas. We have made a lot of new friends in past years in Klosters, and I'm looking forward to seeing them again. After the conference, Alex and I will be joined in Zurich by my 18-year-old son Jonah, who is spending his gap year in Israel. The 3 of us are going on a 5-day trip that will take us to Zurich, Milan, Verona, and Venice. I love touristing through Europe. I love Europe's age. Its architecture dates back not decades but centuries. I love the richness of European culture and the seriousness with which they take their food. I love Europe's mildly decadent, slow pulse. The resting heart rate of Europe is so much lower than I am accustomed to in the US. You often see people strolling aimlessly through streets with no apparent destination in mind. They take their time, sipping tiny espressos in coffee shops, gazing in windows. Time seems not to exist for them. We will visit a few museums, go to a Vivaldi performance in Venice. He was born there. But most importantly, we'll be Europeans for a few days. Only, we'll sit in coffee shops and drink Americano, which is basically espresso diluted with hot water. You cannot completely take the American out of me. And I'll get to spend time with my brother and my son. It's Jonah's first time in Europe. I hope he'll love it as much as I do. The 8%. In 2018, I had a midlife crisis. Some people get a red convertible. I started to pay attention to my health. I began exercising and paying attention to what I eat. Now, I keep away from carbs, mainly flour, sugar, mainly desserts, dairy, and red meat. I am at war with cholesterol, and so far, I'm winning. In 2019, I started to geofence my diet. Let me explain. I stick with my diet religiously when I am in Denver, but when I travel, I have no diet. I can eat anything my stomach or brain desires. I instituted this strategy because I found that it was often difficult, inconvenient, and frustrating to stick to my diet when I am not in Denver. Altogether, I travel about a month a year. This includes vacations. If I stick with my diet 11 months a year, that is 92% of the time, then I'll achieve my goals of keeping my weight and cholesterol down. My initial concern about the geofencing strategy was that I wouldn't be able to switch back to the diet when I'm in Denver. This has not been an issue. I match the diet to the environment. When I get on a plane or drive for at least 4 hours, no diet. But when I'm home, I make myself be good. There is another benefit I've discovered with the geofenced diet. But first, let me tell you a story. When I lived in Soviet Russia for the first 18 years of my life, I only had a soda, a Pepsi, once. I remember how much I loved the tingling sweetness of the magical drink. I was 12. But neither Pepsi nor Coke were to be had in Soviet Russia. I did not have another Pepsi or Coke until I moved to the US in 1991. Here, I discovered that sodas were sold by the gallon, just like water, and I drank them like water. In the first year in the US, my consumption of soda pop made up for all my non-consumption of the previous 18 years. A few years later, when I was 21, after asking for a third refill of Coke at a restaurant, I realized that I could no longer actually taste the tingling sweetness of the drink. Not anymore. I had drunk so many sodas that I had stopped enjoying them, and what used to be a special drink had turned into brown, high-calorie water. At that point, I decided I'd only drink soda on rare occasions, like when I went to the movies. There was no point of drinking so much of it and not enjoying it. My consumption went from a soda, or two, every day to just a few times a year. And an interesting thing happened. I only had one soda last year, but I'll tell you, I enjoyed every sip of it. Abundance often devalues things we enjoy. There is such a thing as too much of a good thing. I did the same thing with food. When I am in Denver, 92% of the time, I look at food very functionally. It is just the fuel that powers me, and I want this fuel to be good for the engine. Just to be clear, I don't eat salad and quinoa and more salad all day, but I do steer clear of food that isn't good for me, often passing on things I like, such as red meat, ice cream, and pasta. But overall, I eat what I like and I like what I eat. When I travel, I eat guilt and carefree, and enjoy every bite. I don't care if the dish is loaded with carbs and dripping with fat. I enjoy that 8% of the time so much that it makes the 92% moderation worth it. So, in addition to inhaling Europe's slow beat and convivial company, I am looking forward to Swiss sausage and Italian pasta. And one more thing on this subject. When I stopped casually drinking soda a quarter century ago, I did not do it for health reasons. I was 21, and my health was not something I paid any particular attention to then. But in hindsight, just that one decision alone saved me 30 pounds of weight. When I had my soda of the year last year, I found it to be too sweet. I have not had sugar in a meaningful quantity in over a year, and my taste buds have changed. I don't enjoy soda as much as I used to, and that's a good thing. Daily journal. I have decided that I am going to start keeping a journal. I listened to Tim Ferriss's interview with Penn Jillette, and I was really impressed with Penn's journaling. He started keeping a journal when he was 30, and at the time, he felt like it was already too late. He has kept the journal for 34 years without skipping a day. Every day, he writes about important conversations he had and reviews books he read and movies he's watched. He writes about things that happened that day. But most importantly, he looks at what he wrote a year, 10 years, and 20 years ago on that day. This allows him to time travel. I love this idea. It allows you to travel back to your life in the past and retain memories and thoughts you'd otherwise lose as they were replaced by daily noise. There is an interesting side effect too. Writing book and movie reviews makes you want to watch movies and read books that are worthy to be written about. I am curious how journaling will impact what I write about and what I publish. I can only dedicate so much time to writing each day. This journal somehow seems more important than some of the usual things I do. My writing may switch from making stock market observations to become more personal in nature. This may also be a great way for me to retain knowledge or thoughts that I gain throughout the day and then somehow lose by the end of the day. Writing down important conversations I have on a daily basis is a great idea too. Aside from helping me not to forget them, it may allow me to explore them further on my own. For instance, yesterday I spoke to a friend about the impact that WeWork had on unicorns, that is, companies with very large valuations that recently went public. Before WeWork blew up, unicorns had access to endless amounts of capital, as private and then public investors were willing to finance their losses unquestioningly. The WeWork blow-up may have changed that, and it is a great thing for companies that have sustainable business models and not so good news for the ones that don't. Uber and Lyft come to mind here. Access to abundant capital forced these companies to fight a war of attrition. I listened to Lyft's earnings calls, where management talked about how they started to raise prices, and Uber followed. Then they stopped issuing discount coupons, and Uber did not, and they resumed. Lyft's CEO said that they'll be the follower, not the leader in price setting from now on. I get a feeling that Uber management listened in on this call too. There is no reason why Uber and Lyft cannot have a cozy, rational duopoly in the US. Lyft is a US-only company. Cultural calendar. I also listened to Tim Ferriss's interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson. There are a few insights that I got from this interview. First, his parents made an effort to take him every week to interesting places. Museums, planetarium, baseball games, concerts. My kids are unlikely to have me take them to baseball games, but I need to make a more proactive effort to expose them to the world around them. I need to set a day each month where I look ahead a month or two and plan our cultural life. Neil's parents did not tell him, "You need to be an astrophysicist." They just exposed him and his siblings to the world. Another thing I took out of this interview is that you really have to be careful what you emphasize. Neil did not have good grades in high school. The New Yorker did a profile on him, which they called him a mediocre student. He said, and I'm recalling from memory here, that the New Yorker was factually correct, but wrong in spirit, because though he didn't have good grades statistically speaking, he had a lot of strong outside interests. He read books about science nonstop. He was president of the science club. He took photos and sold them to newspapers. The punchline here is that if he had chosen to have perfect grades, he'd have had to give up the other interests that were even more important to his education than good grades. Interestingly, despite his mediocre GPA, his achievements outside of the classroom got him into Ivy League schools. As a parent, there is such a thing as grades that are good enough. If Hannah chooses to read books instead of getting an A in class, this is probably better for her in the long run. She read 55 books in 2019, and apologetically told me that due to the agreement about the reading we have, she had cost me $500. I told her this was the best $500 I'd ever spent. If she takes to reading comic books instead of getting A's, though, I may have to rethink this. Thank you for listening. To read this article online, or to listen to more episodes, visit investor.fm. Enjoy life and prosper.